Hi, I'm Sanjay Nag-Chowdhury, Development Lead for the IBM App Connect Enterprise product. In this video, I will demonstrate a new capability in version 12 to validate a JSON message using JSON Schema. App Connect Enterprise has provided support for handling JSON messages for several releases. We have now added support for validating JSON messages using a JSON schema in version 12. A JSON schema is a vocabulary for annotating and validating JSON documents. JSON schema is the exact analogy of XML schema for XML documents. The green box shows a JSON object with three fields: ID, name, and price. This object is modeled by a JSON schema that is shown here next to it. The red box shows an invalid message because it is missing the price field. So here we have a message flow which is using a simple HTTP input and HTTP reply node. It just echoes a message back. The input node is using the JSON domain, and we have a validation tab here which can be used to enable validation. The validate field takes the values either none, content and value, or content. The message model can be specified in the input message parsing tab. So there's a message model field here, and in here we can specify the location of the JSON schema which will be used to validate the JSON document. The JSON schema is shown in a new category called JSON schemas, and if you double click on the JSON schema, it is opened in a new JSON editor which is provided in App Connect Enterprise version 12. So at the top of this JSON schema is a keyword $schema, and this specifies which draft of the JSON schema specification is being used by this JSON schema. So here it is using draft 4. App Connect Enterprise supports draft 4 and draft 5 of the JSON schema specification. These drafts are also used by OpenAPI version 2 and version 3 documents. The title and description properties here are annotations. We don't do anything with those for validation. This type property here describes the type of a document that is being validated. So in this example, the type is object, and this object has some properties. It has three properties. They are ID, name, and price. ID is of type integer. Name is of type string. And price is of type number. Within each of these objects, you can specify other things. You can add other properties. For example, you can specify minimum and maximum. And here at the bottom of the schema is a property called required. And this is saying that ID, name, and price are required for this message to be valid. JSON schema is very lax in contrast to XML schema, which is very strict. So for example, if extra properties were added in the JSON message, it would not cause validation error unless you specify this property here. So if you specify additional properties and set it to the value false, then if the JSON message contains any extra properties, then that would cause a validation failure. So the JSON message can be validated by specifying content and value in the validate field here. And this validation framework has existed in App Connect Enterprise since version 2, so for a very long time. It has been used by many domains like MRM, XML-NSC, and DFDL. So this same framework is now used by the JSON domain. And the JSON message can be validated by an input node during the act of parsing the message. The JSON message tree can be validated by an output node while it is being serialized to a bit stream. And the JSON message can also be validated using a mid-flow node like a validate or reset content descriptor node to check that the message tree is correct. So I'm going to send some messages through. So first of all, I'll leave validation disabled, so it is not specified, and I've not specified a schema. And if I put a simple message through, we will see that no validation is done. So this JSON message has no content in it, and if I send it through the message, it is simply echoed back and no error has been found by the flow. If I now enable validation by selecting the validation tab and selecting content and value on the validate node property and save it, I can now send a message through, and this will cause validation to start. So if I send it through, I can see an error is now shown, and it says validation is enabled, but the name of the JSON schema file to be used was not specified. So I've enabled validation, but I've not specified the message model, which is to be used to validate the JSON message. So if I look at the input message parsing tab, I can see that I have not specified the JSON schema. So I can either type for location here, or I can use the browse button. And the JSON schema is in my application. For simplicity, it could be in a library. So I can click OK here, and it fills the field with the location of the JSON schema. So if I save that and now send a message through the flow and click send, I can see that a validation error is shown, and it informs me that there are missing properties that are required. So it is missing ID, name, and price. And it says that they should have been located in the root of the document, and they are specified in the JSON schema in the root of the JSON schema document. So if you remember, the JSON schema here, I'd specified ID, name, and price were required, but they were not in the message that I sent. So let's try with another JSON message. So here I've specified name and price this time. If I click send, I'm still getting an error returned. And this time it's saying that an object is missing, and that object is ID. So ID should have been in the root of the JSON message, but it is missing in the JSON message, and so a JSON validation error has been shown. Let's try with another JSON message. So this time I've specified ID, name, and price. And if I click send, it's still telling me an error, validation error has occurred. And this time it is saying that the property is type string, but it should have been integer. And that property was ID. So for the ID property, I'd specified string, but it should have been integer. And the location is in the root of the document. And this is described in the JSON schema in root/properties/ID. This hash character here means root of the document. So if we have a look at the JSON schema, so root/properties/ID, we will see the type of the object. So root, properties, ID, we can see the type needs to be integer, and we had specified string. So if I now send in this JSON message, which has ID, which is an integer, a name, and a price, and click send, I can see that the message is now echoed back. And if I click on the message on the wire, I can see the JSON fields under the JSON domain are shown. And if I open the properties parser under the message tree, I can see the name of the message model that is being used. So myschema.json is shown in the message set field under the properties tree. So in this video, I've shown how a JSON message can be validated in a message flow. Validation errors are reported if validation is enabled and if a JSON message does not conform to the JSON schema that is referenced by the message flow. So you can reference the message model by specifying the name of the JSON schema in the message model node property in the input message parsing tab. And you can enable validation by setting the node property validate to content and value.